It's a Sunday afternoon. You're home. The house is exactly the way you left it. Quiet, arranged the way you like it, no one else's energy in the room. And then your phone buzzes. Hey, mind if we stop by later? And just like that, the whole feeling of the room changes. Not because anything moved, but because now you know someone is coming into it. Here's what's actually happening beneath that feeling. Everyone knows someone who dreads having people over. Not because they dislike those people, but because something about opening their home to visitors feels effortful in a way that going out to meet the same people at a restaurant doesn't. It's not laziness. It's not antisocial behavior. And it's not just introversion, although introversion plays a role. In fact, many people who feel this way are perfectly happy meeting the same friends at a restaurant, a park, or even at those friends' houses. The social connection isn't the issue. The resistance is specifically about having people enter their home. And that distinction is the clue. What's really going on is a collision between three psychological systems that most people never think about: how your brain manages territories and control, how your home functions as a restorative environment, and how your nervous system responds when the boundaries of that environment are crossed. Think about it this way. You wouldn't feel the same discomfort if you met those same people at a cafe, a park, or their house. The people aren't the problem. The location is. And that tells you something important about what the home actually means, psychologically. In 1975, environmental psychologist Erwin Altman introduced a framework that reshaped how researchers think about space, privacy, and human behavior. Altman argued that privacy is not about withdrawal, it's about control. Specifically, it's the ability to regulate how much access other people have to you and to adjust that level in real time based on your needs. He described this as a dynamic boundary regulation process. At any given moment, you have a desired level of privacy, how much social contact you actually want, and an actual level of privacy, how much you're getting. When those two match, you feel comfortable. When your actual privacy drops below your desired level, you feel crowded, even if the room isn't physically full. But here's where the home becomes central. Altman categorized human territories into three types, and the most psychologically important was what he called the primary territory, a space owned, controlled on a permanent basis, and deeply tied to the occupant's identity and daily life. Your home is your primary territory. It's the place where you have the most control over who enters, when they leave, and what happens while they're there. Subsequent research confirmed this framework. One study found that decisions made in a person's own territory were significantly more likely to reflect the territory owner's perspective than the visitor's, suggesting that territory doesn't just feel like control, it functionally provides it. Now, when guests arrive, they enter your primary territory, and regardless of how much you like them, their presence does something specific. It shifts you from controlling the space to managing the space. The boundary between your desired and actual privacy narrows. You are no longer alone in the environment you've calibrated for yourself. And this connects to a second layer. Research on home environments has found that people don't just live in their homes. They use them as restorative environments. A study from the University of Texas identified 6 psychological functions that residential spaces serve, including restoration, intimacy, and productivity. The researchers noted that the home has a uniquely powerful symbolic and psychological significance. It reflects a person's past, present, and future self in a way no other environment does. Many people withdraw into their homes specifically to replenish cognitive and emotional resources depleted by the outside world. Researchers studying restorative environments have found that restoration depends partly on what they call being away. The psychological sense of being in a different space from the one that caused the depletion. When that sense of being away is disrupted, when the features of the demanding world follow you into the restorative space, the recovery process is constrained. Now consider what happens when guests arrive. They bring social expectations, conversation, noise, and the need for performance. The very features of the outside world that your home is supposed to insulate you from are suddenly inside it. You're not just hosting someone, you're giving up your recovery environment and doing social labor in the one place that was supposed to be free of it. So, territory and restoration explain the mechanical side of the discomfort, but there's a third layer that makes some people feel it far more intensely than others. In 1997, psychologists Elaine and Arthur Aaron at Stony Brook University identified a trait they called sensory processing sensitivity, a tendency to process environmental stimulation more deeply and thoroughly than the general population. This isn't a disorder. It's a normal personality trait found in roughly 15 to 20% of the population. And crucially, it's partially independent from introversion. Not all highly sensitive people are introverts, and not all introverts are highly sensitive. What the Aarons found is that people high in SPS don't just notice more. They process what they notice more deeply. Their brains engage in greater depth of cognitive processing. They react more strongly to both positive and negative emotional cues, and they pick up on subtle stimuli that others miss entirely. Now imagine that person, someone whose nervous system processes environmental input more deeply, hosting guests in their primary territory. Every unfamiliar sound, every shifted object, every social cue to manage is being processed with more bandwidth than it would be for someone lower in SPS. The cognitive load is higher, the emotional labor is greater, and the environment that normally restores them is now the source of stimulation they need to manage. And because SPS has been observed in over 100 non-human species, the Aarons argue that it's not a cultural artifact or a modern sensitivity. It's an evolutionarily conserved strategy that trades efficiency for depth of processing. In an ancestral context, the individual who noticed subtle environmental changes before anyone else had a survival advantage. In a modern living room, that same individual is the one who notices when a guest moves their things, when the room temperature shifts, when a conversation turns tense, and who processes all of it more thoroughly than the person sitting next to them. This is also culturally shaped. Altman's research noted that the need for privacy regulation is universal, but the specific behaviors people use to achieve their desired level vary across cultures. In some cultures, frequent home visits are the norm, and refusing them would be deeply rude. In others, the home is treated as private space that requires explicit invitation. But the underlying psychology, the need to control access to yourself, operates the same way everywhere. So here's what the research suggests about people who dread having guests over. It's not that they dislike people, it's that the home is doing something psychologically that most other spaces don't. It's a primary territory, a space where identity, control, and self-regulation are highest. It's a restorative environment, the place where cognitive and emotional resources are replenished. And for a significant portion of the population, it's the one space calibrated to their nervous system's particular level of sensitivity. When guests enter, all three systems are disrupted simultaneously. The control shifts, the restoration pauses, the stimulation rises. And for some people, that combination, not any one factor alone, creates a feeling of discomfort that seems disproportionate to the situation, but is, in fact, a perfectly reasonable nervous system response. Understanding this doesn't mean never hosting anyone, but it does reframe the feeling from something is wrong with me to my home is doing exactly what it's supposed to do, and my brain knows when that function is interrupted. And in a culture that often treats hospitality as a moral obligation, recognizing the psychology behind the resistance might change how we think about the people who prefer to meet you anywhere else but home. This is The Human Frame. Facts first. Context always. If this changed how you see something, subscribe.